Bledsoe was arrested.
Patrick Montgomery was in court.
Jonathan Manapa will stay in federal custody.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So 47-year-old Florida man and Proud Boys member Anthony Sargent talked about his desire for violence following the 2020 election. On November 8th of 2020, in a Proud Boys Telegram chat, Sargent wrote in part, quote, "True physical resistance is coming." On November 19th, he wrote, quote, "While we must learn from and study history, our path to the same old atrocities, spelled A-U, is totally different. We need to go ahead and get us some atrocity too." And quote, "Let's riot too." In a message shared in the group in December of 2020, Sargent talked about the certification of the election on January 6th, and he said in part, quote, "I think we are at war and just keep hoping we are not." And then he talked about civil war. He mentioned 1775, which I think he meant 1776, but who knows. And in a December 31st message, Sargent wrote, quote, "Fuck it, storm the Capitol." On January 6th, Sargent was seen among a mob. He was outside an entrance to the Capitol, and he and others were pushing against the police. And when the officers retreated inside the building, Sargent and the mob tried to pursue them. So the officers locked the glass doors behind them. And then Sargent was heard telling another person, quote, "I need like a rock to break the glass." And then he told someone else, quote, "Get a gate to ram it." And then he stood back and he was watching as other peoples did grab a metal barricade and they were ramming it into the doors until the police opened the doors and they sprayed them. So Sargent then picked up some sort of heavy, they said it was a softball size object, and he chucked it at the doors as hard as he could. And then he picked it up and he hurled it again a second time. And he threw it with such force that they said the Capitol surveillance cameras actually shook. Now, sometime later, 3 additional officers arrived. They positioned themselves outside of the doors. They were between the mob and the doors. So a member of the mob stepped up and sprayed one of the officers with a chemical. So that officer told a second officer, "Go grab that person. You need to detain them." That officer went to detain that person, and Sargent stepped in and he stopped the officer. And they said for about a period of 13 seconds, Sargent kept shoving the officer. He kept pushing him further and further into the mob and away from the Capitol door. So eventually a second officer had to go retrieve him, had to go help that officer. So he went over to help and he told the FBI that Sargent actually assisted him with that. Sargent told the mob to basically back off and let the officer help his friend. However, when the 2 officers tried to get back to the Capitol doors, Sargent grabbed one of their arms and then he started shoving both of them, like to keep them away from the doors to prevent them from doing their job. And he was like shaking his head at them and pointing like, "No, you're not doing it. You're not guarding these doors." So Sargent was arrested on September 21st of 2021. And in a superseding indictment, he was charged with civil disorder, destruction of government property, entering restricted grounds, 2 counts of disorderly conduct, and 2 counts of physical violence. In July of 2023, Sargent pleaded guilty to all counts, and he did that without a plea agreement in place. Don't know why, but he did. Based on the felony civil disorder charge, he was looking at up to 5 years in prison, 3 years of probation, and $250,000 in fines. However, the prosecutor asked for 46 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and $2,980 in restitution. So $2,000, just the standard restitution, and then the $980 was for the damage to the door. At his sentencing hearing, Sargent tried to convince the judge that he only tried to break the glass on the Capitol doors because he wanted to get inside and protect the police. Yeah, the judge thought that was pretty funny, too. U.S. District Judge Dabney Friedrich presided over Sargent's case, and she referred to his attempted defense as, quote, laughable. And then she told Sargent and his attorney, quote, to say he broke glass to get inside to help people, I'm not buying that story at all. And then Sargent spoke at the hearing, and he told Judge Friedrich, quote, I wish I hadn't done it. I'm not a violent person. I have massive respect for law enforcement. So the judge interrupted him and said that at minimum, he had interfered with the police and that based on his excuses, it appeared that he still hadn't taken responsibility for his actions. So Judge Friedrich later said that she's seen a common thread among January 6 defendants. That was her phrase, common thread. She said it's their, quote, inability to see the other perspective. You don't say. And then she added that Sargent had shown, quote, no sign of remorse until today. In the end, Judge Friedrich went above and beyond what the prosecutor requested. She sentenced Sargent to 60 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and $2,980 in restitution. I am honestly shocked. I might have to take back every negative thing I have ever said about Judge Friedrich. And for those who don't know, because her name hasn't come up in a while, she is a Trump appointee. And she used to be so pathetically weak. She used to practically bake these people cakes and pat them on the head and, send them home and read them a bedtime story. I mean, that's how weak her sentences were. So who knows? I mean, perhaps 2+ years of sentences and seeing a lot of these people gloat and commit more crimes, maybe it's woken her up. One can dream. So I am just pleasantly surprised with this sentence. So I will let you know if I hear any more. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Please become a donor if you possibly can. Love you all. Take care. Talk with you soon.